Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrel with news and views from the Ethereum on Thursday, March 12th, 2020. And have you got the impression with this coronavirus story that there's a lot of attention being given it, like the magician's sleight of hand? Look over here while I do something over here. I suspect that today's story might be in that vein. There's a very, very interesting story that appeared just yesterday on Zero Hedge. And I have my high octane suspicions, and I have a couple of predictions about it. And I'm going to be reading quite a few paragraphs from this because this is an important story. It's a really important story. And needless to say, we know it's important because the major media, number one, is not covering it. And number two, if it was covering it, it would not be hyping it. All right. So the article from Zero Hedge is titled Banking Crisis Imminent. Companies, listen to this, companies scramble to draw down revolvers. In other words, they're revolving credit. And I'm going to read the first few paragraphs here, skip around toward the middle of the article for about 3 more paragraphs, and then give you a little prediction and pose a little high-octane speculation. So here's the article. Quote, earlier today, we reported that Boeing shocked the investment community when it announced that due to market turmoil, it would immediately draw down on its full $13.825 billion revolving credit facility, an unprecedented move for a company of Boeing's size and valuation, and one which some took as an indication of how frail Boeing's liquidity state was. In other words, cash on hand for a rainy day. And this is ostensibly confirmed by Boeing's surging default odds measured by its 5-year CDS. We disagreed. After all, why would Boeing rush to draw attention to its own funding challenges by fully drawing on its revolver when it knew full well that it had access to the money, safe and sound, located at its syndicate banks? Unless, of course, Boeing was in fact worried about the viability of said banks. As a result, we said that the real reason that Boeing did what it did was simple, especially to those who recall what happened in 2008 all too well. Boeing appears to be worried that a 2008-style financial crisis is imminent and is shoring up all the liquidity it can, so as not to remain at the mercy of its banks, which may refuse to extend it credit at any one moment if their own liquidity is threatened. Which is why we also concluded that now Boeing, quote, one of America's most valuable companies, has shown which way the wind blows. Expect thousands of less credit-worthy companies to follow suit as they scramble to cash in on every dollar in available revolver funding before the banks pull it, unquote. We had to wait just a few hours for this prediction to come true because, listen closely, folks, later on Wednesday, Bloomberg reported that 2 of the world's biggest PE firms, Blackstone and Carlyle, have told their portfolio companies to immediately do what Boeing did earlier in the day. Do whatever it takes to stave off a credit crunch, which, as in the case of Boeing, is a polite way of saying your banks may pull their liquidity, idem est, fail. So get whatever cash you can now when you can and not when you have to. And skipping forward a little bit. Now, stop here just a minute before I read these next paragraphs. We've all heard about all that missing money in the government. So I have to wonder if there's missing money at the same, in the trillions of dollars, at the same time that there's a liquidity crisis in the banks. This prompts the age-old economic question, just what the hell is going on anyway? But to continue, beside Boeing, Blackstone, and Carlyle, other companies which announced plans to draw down on their full revolver were Hilton Worldwide and Wynn Resorts. Of course, the hospitality business has been particularly hard hit by coronavirus, as has the energy business, all reflecting the uncertainty coursing through corporate America as the U.S. economy hurtles into recession. Think of it as companies lining up at their favorite ATM machine to pull all the money that is in the account. It works until suddenly it doesn't. And here is Bloomberg confirming through clenched teeth what we said earlier. A sudden and sustained increase in companies tapping credit lines could eventually strain banks if conditions become so dire that borrowers won't be able to meet their obligations. And I'm skipping again. The fact that everyone is drawing down on their revolving credit, however, shows three things. Number one, these are not normal circumstances. Number two, the U.S. financial situation is on the verge of distress. And number three, they remember what happened in 2008 when one bank after another collapsed the availability on their revolver to troubled companies and sectors. And this time, it will be the banks left with holding the short stick. Okay? So here's my high-octane speculation and my prediction. And as you can tell, one way to bring about a liquidity crisis is precisely by everybody running to the banks, all these big companies, and drawing on their revolving credit. Okay, so it's a corporate run on the banks, folks. All right. So here's my high-octane speculation. This does have, in my opinion, I don't know how, but I just kind of sense that this has something to do with all that missing government money. And let's go back to what happened in 2008. And this was a thing that I brought out at the time, about 10 years ago, about a year after the bailouts. If you recall the bailout hearings before the United States Congress, the bankers, in my opinion, were acting very nervous because they were insisting on trillions of dollars in bailouts, but at the same time, they were insisting that there be no government oversight as to what they did with that money. Now, stop and think about that. They were acting, in my opinion, and I said this at the time, like someone had a gun to their head. They were acting like people that were victims of a kidnapping where the kidnappers say, and by the way, don't call the police. Well, by the way, we can't have any oversight. Give us trillions of dollars, but we can't tell you what we're going to do with it. Okay? Now, I suspect there's a relationship between all the government missing money and some high financial malfeasance due to the bailouts. And the idea that there's not liquidity in the system seems to me to be a bit over the top. Something else is going on. It's related to this missing money. And one of the things I suspect is going on is that the derivatives in the financial system are now beginning to show their ugly head because there's not enough liquidity. And in fact, there's not enough gross domestic product in the entire planet to cover all of those derivatives that the corporate capitalists, the finance capitalists, and the bank gave us as part of the 2008 financial meltdown. So I suspect there's a relationship to those quadrillions of dollars of derivatives sloshing around in the system. Now, that's intuition here, folks. I looked and I cannot find anybody else in the economic or financial world, tying all of this back to the 2008 bailouts and then further back into the derivatives market that mushroomed prior to the 2008 financial crisis. So I think this is all related. And it was, let us remember, the banks that created all of those derivatives, which were, as far as I'm concerned, bundles of rehypothecated securities. Okay, I'll just be very blunt and put it that way. Now, I said that there's a prediction. If this is true, and I have no reason to doubt that it is, because ultimately the source here is Bloomberg. If this is true, my prediction is that you are going to see similar things begin to happen, not only in Europe, but in Asia. And the ones that are going to be the hardest hit, I think, by this are going to be the Chinese. They've already been hit with the coronavirus whammy. This might be another blow. So my prediction is watch Europe and see if we find major European companies going to the banks and drawing on their revolving credit. This could be a very, very bad thing if this spreads. But anyway, yeah, John D. just said in the chat room, echoes of layman's subprime. And yeah, that pretty well sums it up, John. But anyway, that's my speculation here, folks. This is related to all of those derivatives that you'll notice in all of the discussions since the financial bailouts of 2008. The derivatives have just dropped right off the map, haven't they? They were on the map for a brief period at that time, and now they've just simply dropped off the map. And to me, this is the big financial black hole squatting in the center of it all. And the reason no one wants to talk about it is it was the banks that made all of that happen. They were speculating like 1920s American and British currency speculators on the Reichsmark, okay? And we know how that went. So anyway, this is my suspicion, and on the basis of that suspicion, this is my prediction. Because one of the things we have to remember about all of those quadrillions of dollars of derivatives, most of them, not all of them, but most of it ended up in a certain very large German bank. Okay, so there's another connection here for you. All right, Ice Age Bear says B-Day stocks flourishing. Yep, I can do that. All right, folks. Reminder: there is no vid chat tomorrow. The vid chat will be a week from tomorrow. Again, please remember, folks, all of you people who kindly send me articles and things during the week, please, no more stories on coronavirus. I'm simply not going to contribute to the hype out there about it. Anyway, that's the news and views from the Nefarium for Thursday, March 12th, 2020. I'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye. God bless. And take care, everybody.